That's quite the introduction to live up to. Keep my phone up here so I can stay on time. I'm told we have a 1 o'clock hard stop, so I will try to be on time, although you are asking a physician to be on time, so good luck. Let me grab my clicker here. So, obviously, is a topic that I think I'm being asked to talk about because it's in the news a lot. It's something that's obviously near and dear to my heart as a pediatrician. I think I could have had Mr. Winkler give my presentation with that mandate, but I wanted to take this opportunity. I was excited when they asked because I do think that what I see in my office and practice so much comes from a lot of just not having the right information, a misunderstanding, and a lot of incomplete information. We live in a social media driven world where there is so many little snippets and reposts and retweets and all of that that are so hard to keep up with and so easy to post some of these flashy, sexy messages on one side. And sometimes I think enough time isn't spent because it's a longer and harder conversation to really understand the science behind vaccines. So why am I here? As a pediatrician, this is something I talk about every day with my patients. It's something, when I went into peds, I went into it because I wanted to keep healthy kids healthy and help sick kids get better. And vaccines has been such an important part of that in the field of pediatrics for so long. So it's something that is really, really important to my day-to-day job. However, it's also important to me as a member of this community. As he alluded to, I'm born and raised here. This is where we're raising our children. I love this place, and I want the people in our community, my patients and beyond, to have that understanding, to feel good about the decisions they're making for their families. And last, and maybe most importantly, I've had to make this decision 4 times for my own kids. I've had to look at my high school sweetheart and tell her, yes, this is what is best for our kids to do. Or my 11-year-old who was petrified and said, yeah, buddy, you got to do this. And I think that has just led me to really have to go above and beyond just, hey, what does the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend? But to look deeper into it and really understand the why behind the vaccines that we do give to our children and the vaccines that we're recommending to the broader population. So with that, I'll start. I find that a lot of my most successful conversations start with a step back and just saying, what is a vaccine? How does it work? How does it affect our immune system? A vaccine by definition, is a product used to stimulate immunity to a particular disease or pathogen. I like to think of our immune system as in kind of more of a military standpoint. You've got this fortress that is your body, and it's there to protect you. So I think looking at understanding how a vaccine works starts by taking a look at how your immune system works to begin with. So if you think of your immune system as kind of your body as your fortress and your immune system's out there to protect it, it's constantly surveilling and analyzing everything around you, looking to see if you've got a threat. Everything your body touches, every food you eat, everything you do, your body has parts of your immune system that it's looking to say, is this good or is it bad? And so when it does that, it's responding all day long and then determining if it needs to take action to help protect your body from a potential invader. So if it recognizes items that it says this could be something bad, this could be an invader, scientifically we'll call those pathogens, it usually does so by recognizing substances like a sugar or a protein on the surface of the bacteria or the virus that help it say, hey, this is not supposed to be here, this could be a threat. Second part that it does, it says, do we know this threat? Do we know what to do with it already? If you have immunity to something and it knows, it's got a specific set of cells called antibodies that it will send out to go specifically attack that organism in a very efficient manner. If it doesn't recognize it, it'll use what's called your immature immune system. Your immature immune system is the things that make you feel bad. Fever, headaches, sorry we're eating lunch, but snot and mucus and all that kind of stuff. And coughing and everything else to try to help your body clear that threat in a more immediate way. It also has specific cells that have awesome scientific names like natural killer cells and all this, but they actually will go and kind of take out anything that's not supposed to be there, but they're very inefficient. And so that's where your body tries to build its long-term immunity through creating all of these mature antibodies and then eventually what are called memory cells that are basically storehouses type cells that will tell your body as soon as it sees a known invader, hey, we need to go make a bunch more of these types of antibodies because this thing's trying to get us. And so I find that taking that step back, understanding how it works, will lead to an easier understanding of how a vaccine works. So this is just a simple illustration that kind of says it recognizes these surface proteins. You can see the measles, the chickenpox, the flu virus have different shapes of proteins and sugars on their shells. When you hear about viruses mutating and things like that, that's a lot of times what it's changing. They don't want to die, so they find ways to change their recognition patterns so that your body doesn't just efficiently kill them off. But when it sees a new pathogen and it doesn't have an antibody response, it's got to build that. I kind of just touched on this, but those antibodies are very specific to the disease itself, to each unique organism, so that it's more able to take that out without taking out your own body cells or without having to have you have fever and aches and all that stuff for longer. The memory cells are able to ramp up very, very quickly. That's why oftentimes you will come in contact with someone else who has a cold or something else, and you never have any symptoms because your body has so efficiently taken care of it that you never even got any symptoms from it. And that is the key to long-term immunity. That's what vaccines help to build, and that's what our goal is to say, let's get you this immunity without you having to ever go through the process of being sick and potentially getting very sick. So a vaccine works. How it's made is it takes specific parts, usually some of those sugars or proteins on the surface of a pathogen, or it takes weakened or killed versions of those known pathogens, and it allows our immune system to respond in a way that the pathogen itself that's in the vaccine does not allow you to get sick. And that's the basis of why your doctor will always tell you you can't get the flu from the flu vaccine, because what's in there is not a viable organism that can replicate, reproduce, and cause a true illness. And that's why, like I said, we say it's scientifically impossible to get it. We'll talk a little bit later about why you may feel a little bad after, but you can't get the full-blown disease. Revisiting that slide, this is just an illustration to show that kind of surface, taking one little piece of the virus or the bacteria to allow your body to be exposed to it to build that response. And that's what it'll use to create that antibody response that you need for long-term immunity. Hopefully that's the most scientific part of this presentation and we can have a little more fun. So what's in a vaccine? I get questions all the time about ingredients. So here's what's in a vaccine. Here's what's in the vial. Antigens, that's what we just talked about. That's the pieces and parts of the thing we're trying to protect you against. Something called an adjuvant, stabilizers, residuals, diluents, and preservatives. Briefly, the antigen types, just to kind of help you understand some of the words you hear thrown around, that is just what type of antigen, whether it's a killed or weakened virus or one of those surface proteins, and there's all kind of ways those are scientifically made, but you'll hear words like subunit polysaccharide, recombinant, conjugate, toxoid, and that just tells you what part of the virus or bacteria are used to create the immune response. There's also newer technology being worked on now with viral vector vaccines and mRNA vaccines, most famous of which is COVID vaccine. So the next ingredient, adjuvants. These are just substances that are put in there that help induce or strengthen the immune response. The most famous or well-known of these is aluminum salts. People are like, Doc, you putting aluminum in me? You are, I am, because your body knows that it's not supposed to be there, and it's like an alarm system that says, hey, come look at this. We got something here we need to respond to. So you get a much more amplified immune response by having that in there than you would having to put much larger concentrations of the antigens in your body. And I'll talk a little bit later about how those are cleared and why the aluminum in your body is not as scary as it may first sound. Stabilizers, these are just substances in there, usually just simple sugar, salts, gelatin that help the chemicals stay effective while they're stored. Residuals, that is just all of the raw ingredients that are gone into making the vaccine. There can still be trace amounts of some of those chemicals that are left over from the original production process. This can be very small amounts of antibiotics, preservatives, and other things from the storage of the original products. Diluents, usually this is sterile water. I think it's sterile water in all the vaccines that are currently used, and that's just enough water in there to allow the chemicals to stay in suspension. And then preservatives, which get a lot of attention. People talk about them a lot. The big bad word that you may have heard from about 30 years ago, thimerosal, which is a form of ethyl mercury. It was actually taken out of almost every vaccine used in the mid-90s, but it has been extensively studied to show no side effects, and it's currently only used in multi-dose vials of the flu vaccine. And that's because if you use multi-dose vials, you have to have some type of preservative so that each time you draw a new dose out, it doesn't spoil or get contaminated. And I will touch more on that later, because I know those are some of the hot button words that people hear and might be part of your Facebook feed and all of that. So, how well do vaccines work? If you heard me say earlier, there's a lot of attention-grabbing headlines or sexy headlines about the dangers of vaccines that are out there. And I think something that gets way overlooked is the one part of this that may, to me, seem like it should get more attention on the positive side is just some of the successes that vaccines have had. I think that's gotten lost on us a lot over time. The biggest of which was the first true vaccine we ever had, which was the smallpox. This, in the 20th century alone, before the vaccine came out, killed worldwide 300 to 500 million people. That's 500 million people in the world that were dying annually of smallpox. As of 1980, it was fully eradicated. We have not had a case worldwide since then. I mean, I don't understand how that gets overlooked. Controversy has always surrounded vaccines. It was originally derived from part of the cowpox virus, and there was lots of rumors going around then that it was turning people into cows. True stuff. Polio, one that has been more recent that people in this room may remember. Estimates, and they were considered conservative estimates, over 400,000 cases per year with debilitating and even deadly consequences. And it has been eradicated in all but 2 countries as of 2020. Measles, one that we hear about a lot right now, especially with the outbreak recently in Texas. Over 30 million cases per year before the vaccine, with 2.6 million deaths annually. In 2023, there were still 10.3 million cases, but especially due to partial immunity, it was much less virulent, with only 107,000 deaths. The estimates have said we've probably saved 60 million lives from measles since the introduction of the vaccine. One thing that I thought was interesting to point out, if you notice that while it's been a very successful campaign, that's still a lot of cases and still a lot of deaths relative to smallpox and polio. And part of it is because the measles virus itself is so highly contagious that it requires a 95% vaccination rate in order to truly keep it eradicated in a population. And so that's why you continue to see outbreaks, you continue to see cases pop up, especially in underdeveloped countries where they don't have ready access to these vaccines. And it's why you're reminded by doctors and the media and places that it is still so important to continue the vaccination charge on these kind of diseases, because it will pop back up without consistent vaccination. This is a busy slide. I don't think I can provide this resource to anybody who really wants to do it. But it is just to show all of the other viruses and bacteria that we have had vaccine success with. One thing you may or may not be able to see from that slide is those ranges of effectiveness do range from 50 to over 99%. I think a lot of people will spend some time criticizing vaccines on what they don't do in terms of, oh, well, I still got this after having the vaccine. They're not perfect. They don't work 100% all the time. But I think if we had safety devices on our cars that were working at 50, 60, 70% reduction in crashes, we're more than happy to have them. Certainly all the technology we have on them has not been perfect, but I think everyone agrees it's kept us a lot safer on the roads. And I think vaccines has kept us a lot safer. Even in some of our worst ones at 50%, has kept us a lot safer in our disease infections. So are vaccines safe? This has probably been the biggest controversy that has surrounded us. And I want to talk a little bit about the approval process. I think people sometimes don't understand how much work goes into even getting a vaccine on the market. In the preclinical phases, that's mainly bench science. That's a lot of test tubes, that's a lot of computer analytics, and then starting maybe some animal trials. Then you have phase 1, 2, and 3, which are gradually larger phases of trials with more and more participants. In your phase 3 trials, that's where you're getting into thousands of people that it's tested on to eliminate or identify any known side effects. And there have been dozens and dozens of vaccines that have not made it out of these trials because they do identify these side effects and they are pulled before they ever make it to market. And then most importantly is that even after a vaccine does make it to market, it's continually studied and analyzed nationally and globally to look for those side effects. There are reporting systems throughout the world and locally through the WHO, the World Health Organization, the Global Advisory Center on Vaccine Safety, and then locally, it's in the United States, it's called VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System. One of the biggest sources of misinformation, you'll see someone clip a single report from the VAERS system. Understand that it's an open source report, meaning you could go there today and say, I had this side effect from a vaccine you didn't even get if you wanted to. And then the experts will go back and investigate that further if it starts to become a trend. But what they'll take is snippets off of that and say that. And that's just one person saying something happened. It's not even necessarily true at that point. And it's a way that you'll see a lot of misinformation propagated. And then on top of that, there are advisory boards, also globally and domestically, through the World Health Organization, and then locally in the United States through the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, that will review this information continually to make sure that it's in that they're being looked at in a comprehensive way. So we know anybody that goes to get a vaccine will tell you, your doctor should be telling you, these are common side effects: fevers, muscle aches, soreness, fatigue, headache. Why? Because of what we talked about earlier with your immune response. This is your body going, hey, I think I'm getting infected, and starting that process, and that's why it's building that immunity, but you're also getting a little bit of that immature immune response. Rarely we do see high fevers or rashes. Most rashes you get after a vaccine or an illness are actually caused by your body's own immune system, creating a response that floats around your bloodstream and then irritates your skin, and that's where those common rashes come from after illnesses. Rarely you will see allergic reactions. The body, anything you put in your body, from peanut butter to a vaccine, your body can identify as a potential allergen and trigger an allergic response, although those are extraordinarily rare, as well as an adverse or kind of inappropriate response from your immune system to the vaccine. Both of these reactions happen in the 1 to 3 per million doses, so that's 0.00003% for those counting at home. So when we say rare, we mean rare. So what's all the drama about? Why is there so much misinformation circulating? And I'm going to touch on a few of the most common ones real quick. So most of it comes around ingredients. I mentioned a lot of these earlier, but I wanted to directly address most of the ones that I get the most questions about in my office. Aluminum being one of the biggest ones that you hear about. Doc, you're shooting me up with aluminum, or you're shooting my 2-month-old up with aluminum. Well, your tolerable weekly intake that your body can process in a given week is about 10 milligrams of aluminum for an 11-pound baby, which is a typical 6 to 8 week old. Why do you need that tolerable weekly intake? Why is it tolerable? Well, because plants and stuff that we eat every day has aluminum in it. It's in the Earth's crust, and it is absorbed through the growing process from the ground. Between 1/2 to 1 milligram per week is what all of us are consuming in our diet of aluminum that your body is designed to be able to process safely. So all the vaccines in the first 6 months that 11-pound baby is going to get is 4.4 milligrams of aluminum. So less than half of a tolerable weekly intake in the entire first 6 months worth of vaccines. Just for reference, the average breastfed baby will receive about 7 milligrams through their mother's milk in that same time frame, 38 milligrams if you're on standard cow milk-based infant formula, and 117 milligrams if you're on a plant-based infant formula. So you can see that, again, it sounds so scary. It's got aluminum in it, but these are the facts. This is why our bodies can handle that. And we know it's in there because we know it's going to bolster that immune response. The juice is worth the squeeze type of mentality, but it can sound really scary if you don't have the facts. Antibiotics. Doc, there's antibiotics in my vaccines. I don't want my baby getting early exposed to antibiotics. The only antibiotics that are found in vaccines are residuals from the original products that were used to weaken or kill the viruses to create the antigens. So you're going to be talking extremely tiny amounts that are well below anything that's considered to be a trigger amount to induce an allergic response. That being said, I can tell you every single patient that's ever been in my office with a horrible antibiotic allergy that we've identified, I guarantee you is going to go see an allergist to get cleared before they're getting one of these vaccines. That being said, almost all the antibiotics used in these vaccines are not any of the common allergen antibiotics. They're actually a lot of old school antibiotics that we don't even use to treat infections anymore, but we can use them in a clinical setting, in a laboratory setting. Formaldehyde. This one's scary. Doc, you shooting me up with formaldehyde. This is another residual from the storage of the ingredients. It is a preservative. This is, again, a quantity issue. This is what your body is designed to be able to handle. There are 0.8 milligrams in the total of the first 2 years' worth of vaccines. For understanding, that average size 11-pound 2-month-old has an average of 1.1 milligrams of formaldehyde circulating in their bloodstream at any given moment from their own cell's metabolism. And any pear or apple you eat, organic or inorganic, has between 1 and 5 milligrams of formaldehyde in it from its own metabolism when it grew. So the amount is so small, so well within what our body's kidneys and liver are able to process that we're nowhere near the danger zone. DNA, a lot of people get worried about the type of DNA that is found in these vaccines is not able to be incorporated into our own DNA. If this was able to be done so easily, believe me, targeted gene therapy would be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and they would have way more to gain than they ever do from supporting the vaccine industry. Human fetal cells. This is one of those misconceptions. There are no human fetal cells found in any vaccines. However, there are 2 cell lines from human fetal cells from the 1960s that are used in the lab setting to grow the viruses and bacteria that are used to make the vaccines. But in the production and purification process, those the human fetal cells and the cell products are all removed from the vaccines. There are no new ongoing collections of fetal cells since the 1960s that are used for these, and every major religious organization on this planet has endorsed the use of these vaccines on a risk-benefit analysis. And it's only currently used in 3 of the vaccines that we give today: chickenpox, Hep A, and measles. Thimerosal, I told you I'd come back to this one. This was the original mercury fear. This is, again, a misunderstanding of some of the science. What is in thimerosal is ethyl mercury, which is fairly easy for your body to flush out, as opposed to methyl mercury, which is an extreme neurotoxin. No methyl mercury. If that was in vaccines, believe me, every pediatrician would be telling you to run from it. This is the same thing as ethanol versus methanol. All right, that glass of wine, that cocktail you had, that ethanol you were able to flush out pretty efficiently, I guess quantity dependent. To whereas methanol that's in antifreeze and some other products and stuff obviously can be extremely toxic, but it's a simple naming fear. Despite this and a lot of large studies that were shown with no negative effects, it was taken out of almost every major vaccine since the 1990s. But some of those fears still remain. As I mentioned, it is still in the multi-dose flu vials. So if it's not that, what else is it? Too many vaccines at once. Doc, you're overloading the immune system. They can't handle that. They're little. We talked about your body is constantly analyzing everything around it. When the baby is born, they're introduced to 6,000 to 10,000 antigens in the mother's birth canal. In the first 4 years of life, all the vaccines combined, 359 antigens. Our bodies are constantly doing this. The experts that do this stuff have said probably our bodies could respond to 10,000 vaccines at one time before you would overload the immune system. So if it's not that, what's the drama about? Briefly, autism. Obviously, that's the one people talk about a lot right now. It really started with a guy named Andrew Wakefield, who did a study back in 1998 that had a whopping 12 patients in the whole study, which was originally critically flawed for a lack of numbers and no control group. And then later we were found that the data that he presented that connected autism to the MMR vaccine was grossly misrepresented, and the extent that it was misrepresented was considered scientific misconduct. His name, his study, and all the other authors pulled their name off of that study, and it was retracted from the journal with which it was originally published. However, it is still quoted all the time. It comes across my Facebook feed all the time. It's used, and it's just a partial or selective piece of information to paint a quick picture. It's like somebody saying that 90% of wrecks happen within 3 miles of your house without any regard to the fact that 90% of your driving happens within 3 miles of your house. Okay? You can always paint a picture if you use the wrong information. However, these studies have been done. The biggest one I'll highlight is the first one, which is 500,000 people, 2.1 million person years, and those studies showed no difference in autism rates based on the vaccination status or the timing of those vaccines. Multiple other studies in multiple other countries have demonstrated those same results. So if it's not that, what's all the drama about?
2 minutes.
Gotcha. That leaves us usually with the grand conspiracy theory. This one, it's always hard to disprove what they say is going on in the shadows. The biggest thing I would tell you is, while yes, everyone wants to link it back to money, it's an $88 billion industry. For reference, the rest of the pharmaceutical industry is worth $2.7 trillion, so I don't think vaccines is where they would spend their time. Candy alone, $620 billion. Ice cream alone, $110 billion. Vitamins and minerals and supplements, $200 billion. I just don't follow the logic. These are my references. I'm sure y'all want to go read a bunch of scientific journals to follow along. And I think with 1 minute to spare, no one sat in my waiting room too long waiting for me to see me with a screaming child. Thank y'all for this opportunity. I would be happy to take questions. I know we're trying to wrap up quickly, and I'll certainly stick around afterwards if anyone has any they'd like to talk about.
Go Bears, and what's going on with Robert Kennedy?
Well, I think I'm going to need another 30-minute presentation to talk about that. I honestly, he clearly has had an agenda for quite a long time against vaccines, and you know, has started a whole organization that was founded around anti-vaccine movement. Without the scientific backing to back it up, if even his own website that comes on with it is a lot of this same stuff. When I tell you, just go look at what it says and say, does this mean that this correlates with when this child was diagnosed with autism, or does it show that this caused the child to have autism? Because they love to use correlative data to misrepresent the facts.